to our English panel of the data leaders within 4 of our financial regulatory agencies, and specifically to our coalition senior policy advisor, Adam Glass. Adam is a former chief counsel of the Division of Economic and Risk Analysis at the SEC, so he knows of what he speaks, and I'll leave it to him to introduce our panelists, and organize their comments, and call for more audience questions. Adam.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning, which is an ungodly early hour for at least some of you. I can't help but stir the pot a little bit before I introduce the panel, because I happen to know from when I was at the SEC that the SEC has a complete and quality database of all credit default swaps, including index-based swaps. So in theory, that could be shared with the CFTC, but maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. Anyway, you all know the names of the panelists, so I'm just going to ask each one, starting with Srini and working up the way down, to take 3 to 5 minutes, talking about what the remit, the job of their agency is, and perhaps how they're using structured data in that agency.
Good morning. Thank you, Adam. I'm Srinivas Bangarbale. I'm the Chief Data Officer for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And as most of you might already know, the CFTC is tasked with overseeing the futures, options, and the swaps market. We got additional authority in 2010 through the Dodd-Frank Act to oversee the swaps market, which is basically a majority of our focus right now. Where I am situated, my office was created under the IT group in 2011. So it was October of 2011 that I deserted the SEC and joined the CFTC. And I've been setting up the data function in the CFTC. Primarily, we are right now focused on ensuring that there is standards and guidance for the swaps data reporting, and internally that there is enough quality data for our staff to use. Now, these are very simple and cliched terms to use, but it encompasses an entire ecosystem of data and users and reporters for this data and swap data repositories. So it is an extraordinarily complicated system of interconnection between all the parties, and under Commissioner Manley's leadership on the TAC, we've been pursuing a number of initiatives in ensuring there's standardization and there's harmonization of data. On an ongoing basis, we're also focused on ensuring that as the rules get written, we are in front of the rules and we can publish these standards ahead of the rules. We have done that for a couple of rules. We need to do that for all the rules. Which is where we are now. And as we talk, I think you'll learn more about the other things that the Commission is doing. Thank you.
Next is Scott Bauguess, Deputy Director of the Division of Economic and Risk Analysis at the SEC.
Thanks, Adam. I've been an economist now at the SEC for about 7 years. I hold my positions, the man sitting to my right, Jonathan Sokobin, so thank you for hiring me. I also previously occupied the job that I currently have. Matt Reed, to the right, is somebody that worked on my very first initiative when I came to the Commission. It was called XBRL. I was the economist that was tagged with, no pun intended, doing the costs and benefits of those rules, both the 2008 proposing release and the 2009 adopting release. And so I've worked continuously on those initiatives since the inception. And Srini, to my left here, I've actually worked on other data initiatives, structured data initiatives with, and that was the tips, complaints, and referral system following the Madoff debacle and the financial crisis. The Commission undertook a very large structured data initiative to make that information coming into the Commission usable. And those initiatives continue, and that's, I think, generated a lot of success in the programs that we have here. And so, Matt Reed's office, formerly worked with the Office of Interactive Data, is now an office in DERA. Some of the members that were in that original office from 7 years ago still exist. We maintained an active interest in XBRL, but not only XBRL, but all structured data, XML, FPML, pipe delimited to an economist and to our division. How the data is structured is far less important than what information is being structured, and so XBRL is just one way to do that. We also have an Office of Quantitative Research that is working very closely with data that comes in from SROs, FINRA, Form ADV, and other information, making sure that data that comes in is structured and usable by the Commission, as Adam mentioned. We also have been working for several years now with the DTCC Trade Information Warehouse under the OTC Derivatives Regulator Forum Agreement to take information that comes in on security-based swaps, which is structured currently, in making that usable to the Commission. And fortunately for us, unlike the CFTC, the swaps that we regulate, for the most part, are being governed by one swap data repository. That could, of course, change in the future, and so some of our initial problems, I don't think are the same scope and magnitude of what the CFTC's had. So let me just stop there and pass it on.
Jonathan Sokobin is, I guess, chief economist at FINRA, which is the former NASD, both a membership organization of broker-dealers and also a regulatory body under delegated authority from the SEC. Can you talk a little bit about FINRA and the use of data?
Sure. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Coalition for the opportunity to join you this morning. As you will hear, not only am I a former colleague of Scott's at the SEC, I'm a former colleague of Matt's at the OFR. So I guess I think Commissioner O'Malley is gone, but I haven't quite collected the whole set. It's a goal. So I figure you know a little bit less about the work that FINRA does than the other agencies here, and I thought I'd take a second and give you a little bit of a sense of who we are, what we do, and what our role in large data and analytics is. So let me start with who we are. FINRA is the largest independent regulator of securities firms doing business with the public in the United States. There are about 4,100 broker-dealers in the United States, 160,000 branch offices, and almost 636,000 individual registered reps in the United States. Our core mission is to pursue investor protection and market integrity. And we do this through an effective private-public partnership in regulation. We promulgate our own rules, we supervise, surveil, examine, and monitor for compliance with those rules, and we bring enforcement actions when we see violations of those rules. We do this under congressional mandate, and as Adam said, we are overseen by the SEC. So what is it that we do? We do many things, but I'm going to talk about three of them particularly here. Three areas of focus for us is oversight of members, market participants. We have market oversight, and we play a significant role in data transparency around key markets in the US. Let me talk about each of those in turn. So let's talk about member oversight. We're responsible for ensuring fair treatment of customers through things like our suitability rule, ensuring that customers sell clients investments that are suitable for who they are, their investment objectives, the risk that they want to take, where they are in their life cycle. We focus on issues like funding and liquidity of firms. So we've got not only a relationship with the SEC, but we work with the Fed as well, because safety and soundness is part of our responsibility. We're concerned with issues like AML, like cybersecurity, and even things like conflicts of interest that arise out of a broker-dealer's business. Last year, for instance, we launched a high-risk broker initiative to identify brokers who have a pattern of complaints or disclosures for sales practice abuses, and we expedited enforcement against those brokers. Turning now to market oversight. FINRA provides cross-market surveillance for almost all equity markets in the United States. We surveil not only for our own rules, I should have said this earlier, but we also surveil under delegated authority for SEC rules, federal securities laws, and for MSRB rules as well. The surveillance, we have contracts with all of the major exchanges, We recently signed a contract with BATS to include their 4 exchanges within our environment. They will come online in the first quarter of 2015. At that point, we will collect data and surveil for 99% of listed equity securities in the United States. We also surveil in the same way for fixed income and securities derivatives, although we have a less complete view of those markets. So what is this surveillance? We bring in, through the order audit trail system, or the OAT system, from our members who report to us, plus the information that we get from the exchanges, between 15 and 20 billion activities a day. We bring in 6 terabytes of data, and we create from the data, combining the OATs and the order trail data coming from the exchanges, a cross-market model. We then run patterns against that model. And these patterns are designed to detect activities like layering and spoofing, algorithmic gaming, wash sales, marking the open and close, front running, and a variety of trading abuses. When we find those red flags in our data, we then investigate. We can bring actions ourselves. We can bring actions in conjunction with the SEC, or we can refer to the SEC if appropriate. Data transparency is something that I'm not sure that you guys know much about in our role in it. FINRA provides the authoritative source for post-trade transparency for a significant portion of fixed income in the United States. So since 2002, we've been collecting and disseminating for public use trades that occur in corporate securities. It's been rolled out over time, so there was a period where it got phased in, but for all corporate transactions in the United States, FINRA provides post-trade transparency. Since 2012, we've provided transparency in the TBA market and other ABS securities, and in 2013, we added other structured derivative securities. FINRA has also recently published rules that would permit us to make public transactions in 144A transactions as well. So what's interesting about this is that this is an obligation that accrues to our member firms. They must report their transactions that they do either on their own behalf or on behalf of clients within 15 minutes. As soon as we get that trade within our system, it is then put out to a tape. We provide the information to professionals at a very de minimis cost, and for non-professionals, including academics, the information is free. Trading history is free. We believe that by creating that transparency around those markets, we are in fact pursuing our goal, protecting investors better and strengthening markets. Let me turn quickly to technology. A former colleague of ours made an impression on me greatly when she used to say, Dessa Glasser, who was at the OFR, that industry understands that data is an asset, that there has been a transformation in the way that business uses, the business of financial intermediation uses data that it collects and stores. I think the thing that I want to impress upon you is that we as a regulatory body understand that as well, that data is our biggest asset. And in fact, the great leap that has occurred in particularly big data technology and the ability to apply analytics against the big data has been a game changer for regulators. We believe strongly at FINRA that the future of regulation, of oversight, and of surveillance is about leveraging data and risk analytics. So to that point, I want to point to 2 really important initiatives that we're involved in. One is actually something that the SEC mandated for us to get involved in, and that is the Consolidated Audit Trail, or CAT. The SEC mandated that that FINRA and the exchanges, as the self-regulatory organizations, come up with a national market plan to create a single point of collection for all information regarding orders and trades that occur in listed securities in the United States. So this means that there'll be a consolidated view for orders and as they're executed and routed through the many places that they can execute in the United States, from order to execution. And it will give regulators, individual SROs, FINRA as this cross-market monitor and the SEC itself a very complete view of what's going on at an order level. Right? In a similar way, FINRA has recently proposed something that we call cards. This is an effort to collect complete and standardized data from the broker-dealers themselves at the account level. So it's the positions in the accounts, and also importantly, information about the characteristics of the account holder. There will be no private information, no tax ID, no name, no social security associated with it. But we're going to be collecting information about the accounts, so it's post-execution, and this information will allow us to understand, as Commissioner Pivovar said, trends and outliers in the holdings at the broker, at the branch, and at the broker-dealer level, which will allow us to do a much stronger job and be a more effective regulator. Last comment, I know I've used more than my time. When you deal with these issues about data, big data particularly, the issues of data security, about the breadth of the data that you collect as a regulator become critical. We understand our goal is to get to an ask once kind of situation. This has got to be win-win not only for the regulator, for the protection of individuals, but it has to be a win for the industry as well. It's got to be something that levers information smartly and ultimately allows much more focused and effective conversation about the risks that exist within the firms that we examine and supervise.
Matt Reed, the Chief Counsel of the Office of Financial Research, and a former colleague of mine from the SEC. Please go ahead and tell us about your organization.
Great. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Hudson, and the Coalition for having us here. So my name is Matt Reed. As you might have heard, I used to work at the SEC. And Mike Pivovar mentioned Chris Cox, and that's how I got into this area, data and standards. The chairman at the time launched the XBRL program and later the 21st Century Disclosure Initiative. And from my perspective, these were the elements that helped make sense of just an avalanche of data that was coming into the commission. And I'm a firm believer that there's no other way to approach regulation in the future than without good, structured, standardized data. So the OFR came into existence after the Dodd-Frank Act, or through the Dodd-Frank Act. It serves the Financial Stability Oversight Council, which is a council of regulators charged with monitoring the broad financial system, not just particular segments of it, but the entire financial system for market instability. My office, the OFR, serves the council in three basic ways. One, it collects data from across the regulatory environment and from firms that relates to financial stability or instability or risk to financial stability. The second thing that we do is perform research and analysis on those data. And then the final thing is to facilitate the development of standards to improve the quality and the scope of the data that are necessary to analyze financial stability. And it's that last piece that brings the other hat that I wear. Our big financial standards initiative right now is a foundational one, and it's called the Legal Entity Identifier. What we have done together with other regulators here in the United States, in particular the CFTC with Srini, and regulators and finance ministers and central bankers all over the world, is identify and develop the need for a ubiquitous global standard for the identification of financial market participants anywhere in the world. So what we've done is we've identified an ISO standard. We've developed it through ISO. It's 20 characters, alphanumeric. We can go into the details if you like. The identifier will be assigned to anybody participating in financial market transactions anywhere in the world. And the goal is that all of us as regulators here in the United States and abroad and market participants will be able to use the single point of identification for any firm. So there's no more question about whether when you're talking about First Bank of California, you're talking about the same First Bank located in Los Angeles as opposed to the one up in San Francisco or some other derivative of that name somewhere else in the United States. We've developed a 3-tiered governance structure for this legal entity identifier. At the top is a committee composed of 60 authorities from 30 countries. I'm the chairman of that committee. Underneath that is a private sector foundation that will be located in Switzerland, composed of a number of private individuals who will manage the operational governance of the system. There are 3 people here in the audience that have been chosen to be the board. One of them, I think, is going to leave because they have a meeting at 9, and so you're excused, Chris, and so are the others. And what they're trying to do is put together the manner in which they will weave this system together. The bottom level of the system are right now 12 registries around the country, around the world rather. One in the United States, and I think the others are basically in Europe. There might be one in India now. I can't remember if there are 13. Pardon?
There are 13.
There are 13. I stand corrected. These registries have assigned about 250,000 codes so far against the same exact standard, allowing for 6 or 9 pieces of reference data associated with that code. It depends on how you look at it, whether it's 6 or 9, all against a common template. We've issued a common data format. People will be building that reference data to the common data format. And the key thing about these 13 registries and the 250,000 codes that have been issued thus far is any authority in the world that's a member of our committee is expected to recognize these codes wherever they come from for regulatory reporting. So in the case of the CFTC, they have a live swaps rule. If you report a swap to a CSDC supervised swaps data repository, you must get a legal entity identifier to identify you and your counterparty. And you can get that identifier from the US, or you can go to Europe to any of these registries over there and get the same identifier and use it for reporting in the United States. And this is a very important moment in regulation, because it presents an example of a public-private global partnership centered solely around improving the quality of data for financial regulation. So it's a terrific initiative. We've got meetings in Washington this week. The board of directors is meeting today, and then tomorrow 23 members of the executive committee are flying into town to host our executive committee meetings. And the system is really up and fully operational already, but it will be completely launched by the middle of the summer.
Okay, so I think now I'm going to pose some questions, and then we'll have time for audience questions. And I also want to work back down so we can stick with that. When will the fully developed LEI, with all the governance issues worked out and the foundation set up so that it is as fully developed as possible, ready for prime time? What's the schedule on which that will occur?
Well, I think it's ready for prime time now. It's being used in live reporting rules, which means that the official sector is basing their reporting on this identifier from these 250,000 entities that are already reporting using the identifier. So I think it's ready for prime time now. When it will be kind of fully operational and complete is never. And that's because we expect this to proliferate. If we have our way, what will ultimately occur is the barcode effect. So Tim Smucker, who is the former chairman of GS1, which does the barcode, is on our board and is helping to steer this toward some sort of a barcode effect type result, where it wouldn't make sense to do business in global financial markets if you didn't have a barcode. So that's the end state for us, but that never ends, as you can imagine. But the steps in between, we'll have a foundation formalized. It's a matter of filing legal documents. This summer, the board will formally take control as the year passes on. And so the handoff will be sometime later this year from my body, the Regulatory Oversight Committee, to this private sector board of directors. And then they'll begin the operational control of it. We'll continue to supervise to ensure that this public good remains a public good. But I think that's really the timetable. The next 6 months, the final handover of operations. But this is an evergreen project, Evan.
Jonathan, are you collecting LEIs now, and will you be further on? Not you personally.
Right, because I know the answer to that. So FINRA, certainly contemplates in certain instances that the LEI is a very useful indicator. Right now, our systems are really surrounding, or really based on an MPID, a market participant ID. And part of the difficulty is, and Matt knows this, is that in different instances, the ID reflects a different element or different part of a legal entity. In many cases, the MPID doesn't reflect an entity per se. So you can take a large house like Goldman Sachs, who may have a single MPID that they use both for their own trading and the trading that occurs on their ATS, Sigma X.
Let me just cut you off there. I can appreciate that the LEI is a legal entity standard, and in general it will not respect the divisions. I think there's an exception for foreign branches of U.S. banks and vice versa. Even though you have more granular disclosures, it seems to me that you could ask for the LEI to be added into that for whoever the legal entity would be for that smaller, and that would make matching your data up with other databases easier.
And there are other instances like the CAT rules that permit us to contemplate that. So it's, well, we collect ADV and PF on behalf of the SEC. So we're just a processor of those data, and those data actually do, I think, have space for the LEI as well.
Thank you. Scott, I wanted to jump off the LEI. For many months it was my favorite topic. I wanted to ask, this HERT bill that's been discussed, which would eliminate, basically would be an exemption for any company with 250 million or less in revenue that would last to the later of 3 years, or I believe it's the SEC putting out a cost-benefit analysis that shows the positive net benefit. How would that affect the ability of the SEC and outside consumers to use XBRL if we take out 61% of the filing population?
Well,
yeah, push the button when the light goes off.
okay. All right, that works better. So our estimates of the HERT bill at 215 million in revenue, I think, is similar to what's been kind of discussed in DTC and others, that upwards of 60% of the filer population would no longer file an XBRL. What we knew before 2009 is that about 1/3 of all filers did not have coverage by data aggregators, and that's really the mechanism by which all the software tools that you use for analyzing companies takes place. And the reason is institutional investors don't care about smaller companies because $100 million market cap is not big enough for them to invest in. So by default, data aggregators then don't collect that data because that's not part of their revenue model. XBRL allowed that, those companies to get coverage, and data aggregators now include that information in their databases because it's low cost to do so. If you exempt 61% or 60% of the filers, then it's likely that you go back to the pre-2009 era in which a lot of the data is not available to be sold, and so therefore be less likely to be used. And so there's, I think the DTC has published, their thoughts on, what knock-on effects there might be of this. I'll just point out one additional thing that's not often discussed, but it's very important to the SEC, and that is we have a Regulation Flexibility Act requirement, which is to assess the impact of all of our rules on small reporting companies. And because XBRL has now been phased in fully for all the entire population of filers, we're actually able to do analysis on smaller companies that we couldn't previously do. And that's in, for example, assessing the impact of a HERT bill was made possible because of XBRL data. 3 years ago, we would not have been able to make that estimate.
Poetic justice.
What's that?
It's poetic justice.
So the broader point is that, this cost savings smaller companies get by not reporting XBRL will be offset by potential benefits that, we could have in making more efficacious rules. And let me retroactively say that that view is my own view and not that of the commission or any of my colleagues on the staff. I could feel the pressure around with my former colleagues to make that comment. So,
Suggested you turn the mic on.
So now I'm going to throw something out to all the panelists, but starting with Srini. And in being at the Data Coalition, where I've been since November 2013, it's been quite interesting because I've gotten acquainted with some of the history of the SEC. For example, that the Edgar the Edgar database, which everyone who is an investor in public companies in the U.S. Uses all the time. It's the fundamental repository for corporate filings, 10K, 10Q, and securities listings. But it's in HTML, the part that the industry relies on, so it's not fully utilized. I learned that website was only made free in public because an open data advocate, Carl Malamud, bought the data and got a license and then put it up on a computer and offered it free for a year and then shut it down. That is why we have public Edgar today. The SEC thought it was just going to be, for internal use. So I wanted to, another aspect of being at the Data Transparency Coalition, I meet a lot of old timers, even older than me, at least in doing this. But I must be having in mind that my 60th birthday was last week, so happy birthday. One of these guys that I met is a quant with administration experience, Mark Foreman, and he mentioned when we were talking to him about implementation of the Data Act, because there will be a lot to do for implementation after it passes, that typically you don't get opposition from an agency by the people who are at the lowest level, the true worker bees. Because if you bring data and automation, that makes their job easier. Then you have a level of, I don't know, 2 or 5 layers of middle management, too many of which are instinctive naysayers because they don't have a profit motive, so then the motive becomes risk avoidance. And then you get up to the commissioners that are not as bought into the agency culture because they haven't been there as long, political appointees. They're often forward thinking, as you probably got the impression from the speaks by Commissioner O'Malley and Mike Pivovar just now. But the message never makes its way up from the people on the bottom through all those layers of naysayers to the people at the top, kind of a sandwich effect. So what I want to ask all of the panelists, but starting with Srini, do you see that kind of effect at your agency?
I think fortunately the CFTC is big but small enough not to have too much of that effect. I think it used to be a much smaller agency, and we've grown in the last couple of years. And hopefully we'll grow further because there's so much work that we can't get it accomplished in our lifetimes. It's not as pronounced. I would phrase it slightly differently in the CFTC as I have seen. It's not necessarily that the layers of management have of resistance. I think it's more of a culture of, if you write a rule, then the market participants should know what to report, kind of culture, as opposed to, if you write a rule, do the market participants know enough to report quality data to us so we can use it? So we have, the users clamoring for good quality data, users meaning our economists, our surveillance analysts, our enforcement folks. We have, of course, the data and the IT folks clamoring for good quality of data and standards. We have commissioners clamoring for good quality of data and standards and use of data in an effective manner. And I think we have, in some ways, a lot of the rule writers clamoring for the same thing, but I think they need to be led because they don't always know what the path is. Yeah, and I have to say that it's not been a very difficult thing to convince them of the need. It's been more of an issue of resources for us.
So let me then ask Scott the same question, but also answering perhaps along the lines of, is there a chief data officer at the SEC? Is there any single person whose job it is to push or lead the SEC in the transformation that Hudson mentioned from old-fashioned disconnected documents to interactive structured data?
I think slide rules actually still work fairly well. So do pencils. I think I'm being set up a little bit with this question, but we have a Chief Information Officer, Tom Baer, who understands the IT infrastructure resources required for structured data. In DERA, Division of Economic and Risk Analysis, we have 2 offices dedicated to working with structured data initiatives, either taking data in that we currently get from various sources, commercial data, SROs, as well as an office, as previously mentioned, and some of the staff I see here in the room here from the Office of Interactive Data that works with forms and filings and to make them better. So just broadly speaking, I mean, the chair is committed to a culture of smart disclosure. I think it's shared broadly within the commission, even though sometimes I think people from the outside don't think that's true. To some extent, it's somewhat unfortunate that XBRL came out for financial reporting in January of 2009 during the height of the financial crisis, and the Dodd-Frank Act and Jobs Act, followed thereafter. And so there are competing priorities for a number of really good initiatives, and there's still a burning fire inside the SEC with dedicated staff on structured data initiatives, and it is something that in every rule that comes up, we consider carefully, how can we structure these forms, not just in collecting financial data, making that available to the public, but understanding, how we should collect it to make that data most usable. So just one point is that data formats and schema is only one element to providing good structured data. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into what information you collect when you get away from numbers and go to narrative disclosures. How do you make that transition? And even reporting numbers by themselves, if they're not standardized across filers, isn't very usable. And so it's not as simple as turning on a switch. There's a lot of effort that goes in to making structured data usable, and so we carefully think about each of those initiatives as they come up.
Thank you, and now actually Jonathan and Matt are going to be let off the hook because we're going to audience questions. I have a lot more questions, so if the audience is shy, you'll get your
Just for the
turn.
record, we don't have that problem because this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Any questions? Any questions? Yes, we do.
Hi, Greg Sisler from Merrill Corporation. Just to anybody on the panel, it seems that intuitively that the HR bill that was passed by the Finance Committee last week is going to be harmful to smaller companies because their data is going to be less available, and you cited some reasons already, but I wonder, is there anything quantitatively that can be stated to sort of in opposition to this bill that can demonstrate the usefulness of the smaller companies participating in XBRL and sharing their data that way? It's common sense and it's intuitive that it's a good thing, but is there any way to demonstrate that?
I think Commissioner Peelwar's earlier remarks on it would be great if we could get concrete examples of how this information is being used. That's something that we need to do. And just broadly speaking, if you're a small issuer, it's very easy to see the expense of complying with the rules. It's much harder to see the benefits or anticipate the benefits of how it might affect capital formation. And so to some extent, if you're focusing on products innovation in your company, you know what the cash outlay is, whether it's $20,000 or $25,000 for you to do this. You don't know how investors are using it or how analysts are using it. And so that's something that we need more concrete evidence and not just the theoretical basis for why we should have this.
We'll take 3 more questions. I'd like to ask all the remaining questioners to address just one panelist for the sake of time.
Hey, Kevin Davis, Find the Best. This is primarily for Jonathan. You're lucky for that one. Find the Best is a website that uses data to help consumers by making it understandable. Recently, some of this data that we've been able to put on the site has been made available by the SEC with regards to registered investment advisors and their representatives in a daily compilation. And what are FINRA's plans to do something similar for broker-dealers and their representatives so that individuals and private companies can take that data either in bulk or through some daily compilation and put it out there to the public, make it more valuable?
So I don't know what data about investment advisors is being made public, but what I can tell you is that, for instance, BrokerCheck, which has got a ton of information about brokers' histories, and their experience is already available. We make a fair bit of data available online, and through, as I said, our transparency data is available to bulk resellers at a minimal cost. So I think we are very active in trying to provide markets with a broader range of data that we think will help the investor understand not only what the true value of a transaction should be, but also about the history of the individuals who participate in the market so that they can make better informed choices.
Can I ask the questioner, what are the obstacles now to getting the data that you think would be removed by FINRA being more like the SEC when FINRA makes broker-dealer data available as a compilation?
Yeah, sure. BrokerCheck's a great tool, but requires us to go onto the FINRA website and use it kind of individually, broker by broker. You know, we, as a private company, we're looking to ingest data and kind of put it into our own platform and use structured data in aggregate to kind of provide more insights to our users when they're thinking about their financial decisions. So just allowing us to have more control over transforming it, displaying it, and utilizing our platform and technology to kind of take it where we want to go with it.
Let's do 2 more questions, but feel free to mill about afterwards and meet the panelists.
Hi, Tim Lee with FI Consulting, and I've heard quite a bit actually about how the folks on the public service side want to make use of all this data, how the value for the government. What I'm interested in, I guess this is as much to the rest of the audience as to the panelists. I know that putting out the railroads, for example, to give a historical example, led to the rise of companies like Sears Roebuck. The printing press led, it has been argued, to democracy. We put this data out there in the public format, and I hear it being talked about as an asset. What does that mean for the entrepreneurial folks on the private sector side, on the civilian side? What's the dream about what this data makes possible? I think that's something that's that's very very important to be aware of as well. And I think something that's probably perhaps a few steps down the line, but important to start thinking about.
I think that's a very important area of focus, and I'm sure Scott, when he does his cost-benefit analysis, looks at, those are the very things that rule writers are supposed to look at. What are the benefits both to the government, but also more broadly to the public when we do these initiatives. I can tell you that on the legal entity identifier initiative, the very reason we chose a public-private partnership is because we want to make the standard valuable to industry and to the markets. So we went to a private industry standard setting organization to create the standard so that they could build it in a way that they could use in their systems, not just government systems. We've created a board of directors of private individuals so that they can operationalize this system in a way that will serve them and not just the regulators. Now, we oversee it to make sure it also meets our needs, but we think that's a critical component to get the pull on the other end. We can push through regulation, but if all you do is push and there's no pull, then you're just going to have a bolt-on reporting requirement using the LEI. We want to get this LEI sucked into the systems of these banks and of these brokers and so forth, so that it becomes embedded throughout their value chain. In fact, we want them pushing it out to their suppliers, and so that's the approach that we've taken. There's an article, I think the number's overstated, but there's an article by somebody named Alistair Milne somewhere in maybe Oxford, who estimated the potential savings to banks and other financial market participants of the LEI of potentially $10 billion per year. Again, I think that's a big number, so I don't take credit for it. I point to him. But even if it was a fraction of that, that would just be an enormous benefit because of all the efficiencies it creates. So I think that's a good thing to be focused on.
And we're out of time. In a minute, don't hold your applause. I'd like to ask you to thank all the panelists, but I just wanted to announce that just as our coalition is pursuing structured data in financial regulatory reporting, as many of you know, we're pursuing the same campaign for the U.S. government's own spending. We're excited to see congressional action on the Digital Accountability and Transparency Act, or DATA Act, which will require the U.S. Treasury to establish government-wide data standards for all spending. That's financial reporting, budget action reporting, grant reporting, contract reporting. We're expecting congressional action on Data Act very soon. And I'm excited to announce this morning that on